Let's talk about Bochica. All right, so I want y'all to bear with me because I have a lot of thoughts on this book, but I'm going to front load my star rating and let y'all know that I gave this book a 4-star. And now here comes the explanation. So, first, I got to tell you about what Bochica is. So, let me read it a little bit. So, Bochica was written by Carolina Flórez-Cerchiaro and is a Gothic horror novel that uses the indigenous figure of Bochica to explore themes of generational trauma, family secrets, and the blending of European and Muisca, a Colombian culture. And this is where I went a little bit into the research rabbit hole. Didn't stay in there for too long, but I was like, let me find out a little bit more about Bochica. And I'm looking at BahaiTeachings.org as well as Wikipedia as my references. Take Wikipedia with a grain of salt, right? But according to these two resources, Bochica is an indigenous Colombian figure that taught the indigenous people in that area about agriculture, medicine, and other arts. Or some of the resources are saying that the figure of Bochica taught moral teachings to the indigenous people or how to be a better way of being, but also take that with a grain of salt because we know already that the dominant culture, which is Eurocentric dominant culture, tends to have this way of viewing indigenous cultures with a condescending lens, with a inferior lens, as if they're superior to the indigenous cultures that they've come upon. So I always take those kind of notes with a grain of salt. So I ask you to do the same. But nevertheless, the figure of Bochica is used here in this book, and is also the namesake, the title of this book. So I'm going to start by saying this, that as someone who wrote a psychological horror, gothic, magical realism book, I went into Bochica not even expecting this, because Bochica is historical fiction as opposed to the Ordinary Bruja is contemporary. But I found these two books to be like cousins, like they're connected. They have a lot of similarities, and I just feel disingenuous if I don't say this, because I wrote The Ordinary Bruja, comes out on November 4th, and I read Bochica, which came out this year, but then there's, I think the paperback copy will be coming out on March 2026. So there was a lag in there between the different formats of Bochica coming out, but thus far it has arcs out there, and it has the hardback, I believe, and then the audiobook version out there. I listen to the audiobook version when it comes to Bochica, but like I said, they could totally be cousins. They have ghosts, they have family secrets, complex mother-daughter relationships, and they have kind of like the reluctant hearing the daughter trying to figure out what her mother was doing, and it's almost like she's going through this mysterious scavenger hunt trying to figure out all the secrets that the mom just kept to herself without telling the daughter, but these secrets are needed for the daughter to figure out what to do in this story. So that's like a big thing that these two books have in common. However, the setting is completely different, right? The time frame is completely different, which makes the stories vastly different. But I just wanted to point that out because I was like, oh my God, these two are cousins. So saying that, if you enjoy Bochica and you would like to read a kind of contemporary version of that, then The Ordinary Bruja will be for you. But let's get into Bochica, why don't we? I love the atmosphere of it. The writing is slow and steady and incredibly immersive. And Antonia, the main character, felt very real to me. she's reflective of her time and the world she's in. I saw some some reviews of the book where it was saying that she perhaps was too modern, or some were contradictory to that. Some say that old school per se, because she was kind of like entrenched in misogynistic views. But I found her to be right up to par with the time and the setting that she was in. Antonia is basically fighting between the responsibility to her family, which as a Latina, you would definitely relate to this, as well as your yearning for independence and to be your own person apart from your family. And this is like a pull, a push and pull that is very prevalent in the Latina community, because we are very much family centric community. So it's kind of hard to detach yourself from the family unit to become your own person away from the family unit, because you're so entrenched in it. Everything that you do is like family oriented since you're very little. And we see this in Antonia. Antonia is a character that she has this guilt, because at first she thinks her father was the one that unalived her mother. And it's a mystery that is set on the very first chapter, and I was hooked by it. And I'm trying to figure out throughout the whole book who actually unalived the mother, because a lot of people said that the mother did it herself. Other characters in the book are saying that, but Antonia, she knows that that's not really true. And you can sense her doubt throughout the entire book as she's trying to figure out what really happened to her mother. And in here lies the mystery, because throughout the book, she is uncovering it slowly but surely. This story that when I got to the end, I was like, wow, this is what it is? Okay. For sure, didn't even see that one coming. But it's completely immersive to me. Like I said, I'm seeing Antonia as a woman who is navigating patriarchal systems where speaking up wasn't even like an option. In the book, she's called a little girl quite a lot. On the same breath, she's also called a little too old to not be married, so she's finding herself in this middle ground where she's not being taken seriously in society by people around her, because she's either too young to have a voice, and also too old to be alone and doing these things by herself. And I think the book handles that beautiful. Also, Bochica doesn't shy away from calling out colonialism and the whole white savior complex. And hear me out. This is where I got this. Towards the end of the book, Antonia is questioning her mother, right? She's at the point where she has found out quite a lot about her mother. I would say almost enough to get to the climax of the book. And she has this thought, and I think this is where authors, when their characters have this malignant point of view, that this is where they can come in and rectify that, so that way they leave the readers with, right, a more responsible point of view, right, where we're not coming out of there learning bad things, quote unquote, but good things. And Antonia, she realizes that her mother was kind of like doing this white savior-ish stuff in there, because her mother kind of like created this cult to protect this land that is the land of indigenous folks, by bringing and putting a casona in there, like this big mansion. And she's like, boom, I'm the savior of this land. And I was like, if that doesn't give you Christopher Columbus, I don't know what does. you know, but Antonia, the main character, she's like, well, that was wrong too. It's wrong what's happening now, but also what my mom is doing is wrong. And she sets out to undo everything, even what her mom started to do with good intentions, but poor execution, but also poor planning that didn't foresee how this power that you gain from this land could potentially get people to be really greedy, because now they have a taste of it and now they want even more, which is what ends up happening here. But I'm not going to tell you how Antonia goes about and like turns it all around. But I do want to point this out to let you know that at the end, the author does make a point to make sure that we know, right? And she's not beating us over the head with it, but we understand through Antonia's internal thought process that she acknowledges that what her mom did was wrong. And now it's up to her to change it. Now, there were some small things that pulled me out of this book. I love this book, right? But there were some small things that did pull me out. And one of those things was Antonia switching from calling her dad Papa and then Ricardo, and then calling her mom Mama and then Estela. You know, so it's kind of like, you know, going back and forth between Ricardo y Papa y Estela y Mama. And it kind of like, every single time that would happen, it will pull me out. At first, I was like, well, I just have to get used to it, because sometimes that happens. I just have to get used to the narrative and the writing in the beginning in Act 1. And then in Act 2 and Act 3, I'm cognizant of it and it doesn't pull me out of the story. But in this instance, for this book, it did, unfortunately. And that's just a me thing. That's not like necessarily a you thing or every reader out there thing, but I grew up calling the woman that raised me Mama. I would never call her by her first name. And the same with my biological parents. I would call them Mami y Papi. I would never say Carmen or Sebastian. Ugh. God. I don't know what would have happened, but I don't want to know. Also, another thing was that the ending was a little quiet for me, because there's a point in there before Act 3 where I'm like, oh my, Antonia is going to undo all of this. And I am really thinking of this big crescendo, per se, as the climax. And I think it's because it started feeling a little reminiscent of Marisol, as well as she kept going back, and this is in the Ordinary Bruja, kept going back until she finally like realized what she needed to do. And I did give Marisol like this big last fight and crescendo in the book. So I was kind of like expecting the same thing, because I was thinking that Bochica was gonna follow in kind of like those steps as well, but it didn't. It was a climax. It was a satisfying climax. It was just a little bit more subdued than what I expected. Another thing that kind of like, I made a note of it, but it didn't pull me out. Although I saw that for some readers, it was like a big no-no. And it was like, the book used some phrases that are kind of modern for a book that is set in the 1920s, kind of like veering towards 1930s in Colombia. And I was like, okay. I made a note of it, but it didn't take away from my immersion or my enjoyment of the story like it did for some readers. So yeah, I gave Bochica a 4 stars. It's gorgeous, atmospheric, and thoughtful. I think if you love Mexican Gothic or other stories where history meets haunting and that Gothic atmosphere, definitely pick this one up. And I'm going to say it again, if you end up craving a contemporary cousin with the same Gothic bones but modern, then you might want to check out The Ordinary Bruja, which comes out November 4th and is available for pre-order. I'm also linking Bochica over here on this video. If you get it from bookshop.org, I get an affiliate kickback. So if you do want to buy the book, please use my affiliate link. Thank you. And if you think you're going to like both, I say read them back to back. Read Bochica and then read The Ordinary Bruja. And let me know what you think about these two cuties. All right. Bye.